talk to Monica today. And with that, I will pass over the presenter privileges. Yeah, and we can see your screen.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the site that I'm using, and I'm going to have two different windows that I'm going to be jumping between. I've got my Chrome, show my as the creator of the site, and then I opened up a separate, which is in Safari, which would be the student perspective. So I'm going to be toggling between those two, just so you know, in case you see me kind of jumping around, and hopefully that pulls up well on your. Again, my name is Monica Martinez. I am the Director of Professional Development at TCA out of Austin, Texas, and I'm a Google Apps for Education Certified Trainer. This particular topic I was really excited to put together because a lot of times we see Google Apps come together mostly for productivity purposes and, of course, a lot of collaboration in Google Docs. But in Google Sites, along with a lot of the other products, you can actually build this really nice collaborative space. The idea behind today's session is taking a look at how can you use Google Sites and the rest of the Google Apps EDU products and incorporate them to create your almost like a learning management system when you pull them all together. And so I'm using Google Sites to display all of the content, and this is kind of the classroom that I've created. Websites built, and I've seen a lot of examples of Google Sites. The majority of them, whether it be Google Sites or any other site, people usually build these to be able to disseminate information, give out different resources. Sometimes it serves kind of like as a portal tour. People will come to the site and click on links to take them somewhere else, or just to be able to see, for example, or classroom announcements, or just simply activities to download and so forth. And here is going to be to see how we extend that and take that to a whole different level. So start by, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. It's going to move some things around, but I'll adjust as we move along. That I've created, and I will be sharing this site with you so that you have access to it. So for those of you interested later on coming back to go to sites, you can definitely use it as an example. Included a couple of things here, some of which are productivity types of items that you can expect to see on sites, and then the rest of them really are going to target collaborative learning space. So this is my home page on the Google site that I've built. Pretty much this information appears just for you to see, but otherwise this is where the information would start for this particular site. So I'm going to be using the different elements. Example, first thing I've got here, of course, recent posts. We're used to seeing that with announcements, and that's exactly what this page is. It's pulling it recent post from my announcement page, which I've got down here under historical figures. And now I'm using that in a history classroom where each student has been assigned a historical figure where they have to then, based on the historical figure they have to go do research on it, and they're supposed to post on that historical figure based on the date that they've been assigned to post this information. So all of the different figures that we would be talking about in a history class over the span of that semester or the year, then students would be responsible for actually posting about these different historical characters. Then allow us to the student to be the ones that have to go out and seek this information and share it with everyone else. So they're the ones providing that information. Of course, also be an assignment. But that's how this is working in the case of me coming back to the home screen. Whenever students were to come to this site, then they've got all of these historical figures that we're about to talk about would be listed right here, so they would have that shortcut to be able to get to information about them, because this is what we're about to cover in the room. So that's to really just kind of involve your students. Because page level permissions, I can give my students permission to come into the historical figures page and be able to come in here and post. I'm going to go to my other site, and I'm going to go to, I'm logged in here as a student. As you can see on the right-hand side, I do not have the editing features because as a student right now I'm only able to view. But when I'm into the historical figures page, then I will have the option to post, and you can see here it says new post, meaning that I can actually post to this particular page without affecting any other page that I don't have rights to. And so I love that new feature that was released not too long ago, which is, again, the page level permissions. So that's going to allow me to do that kind of functionality within this particular site that we've built here. So workaround or other option for those of you who still might not want to give access to different pages, and I just called as for students historical figures. I'm going to click on this, and you're going to see I only have 2 links now up here at the top on the left-hand side. What I've actually done is create a completely separate website. I just gave it the same look and feel so that the end user wouldn't be able to tell that they've actually left my site. It looks like you're still in the same site. And instead, I just went into the back end and added that page as a navigation link via URL. So it took me to another page, and then all I had to do was link my original page here back to TC History 101, which is my original site. It's just taking me right back over to it. So for you who still aren't comfortable or don't want to give your students access to particular pages but still want them to edit on certain pages, then you could create completely separate sites that allow your students to navigate to those sites where they have control, and then again, it's just a matter of putting that link that takes you right back to it. So if you do either of the two, both will allow you to be able to do exactly what I just did. The drawback to having a separate site is that the announcements wouldn't feed in like this into your home page from a separate site to doing it within the same site. But still doable to have your announcement page be turned into more of a blog. You can also use them for journal entries, which would definitely play a role when you're trying to do reflection questions and so forth. The things that I added here, of course, you can see some widgets over here on the right-hand side. That's pretty standard widgets that you can find because it's a history class. I have history photos and daily history for Texas and then today in history. You'll see here at the bottom I include a Google Moderator, and this is just lessons in history. And what I've done is this Google Moderator, I've created separate different topics here. So covering the war in Iraq, the Civil War, and any other wars that I happen to be covering in this class, I could list them here as separate topics in my Google Moderator. And students would be able to come directly here and go into, let's say they're covering historical figures, and a student wants to ask a question about that, they could actually come directly in here, and you can see it says, why was Martin Luther King Jr. assassinated? Other students could go in and post a response to answer that question, etc. So you have everything directly on here as opposed to having a page full of links that takes students to a lot of different places. The idea behind this Google Moderator here. All right, I'm just zooming in a little bit so you can see her. So left-hand column, so this was just my home page, but now I'm going to move on to my calendar. On a site, a calendar will be used to basically give you information about like assignments and homework and tests, things like that that are coming up, which I have created that functionality for this particular calendar, but I've added a secondary function for it beyond productivity. So you can see the items in green here relate to assignments that are due. Historical figure posting is due, so you can see that there. I posted a test writing 2 and 3. They're going to have a test on chapter 3 to 6. But beyond, I have, in addition to that, kind of like our own timeline of history. We're using the calendar where you put a date, and then of course I required the year because the Google Calendar will not go back this far. Put in the date at first, and then put in the main event, and then the description below that in the event detail. Creating your own timeline here. And obviously, you can assign things differently as far as what needs to be posted. Because I have these set up in my calendars, everything you see in green is a calendar that I have control over, and my students can only see, whereas the items in blue here, my students have control over as far as being able to post it. But here you have a single view by importing your calendar into your Google site. Go in there to do that, and I don't know how much experience everyone here in today has, but I'm just going to quickly demo just in case there are a few of you that haven't done that process before. I simply go into my Google site, and I'm just going to go into my edit feature here and bring in multiple calendars, as you can see here, and there are the different colors. I can set, of course, different settings to these on the back end in my Google Calendar so that they come in like this and they come in separately. What's going to help me do is allow my students, I'm going to jump over to my student here, and I'm going to go to Calendar. Once my students if they all have Google accounts, you'll see the Google Plus down here at the bottom, and allow them to be able to click on that icon, and these calendars would then appear on my student calendar accounts. And I just clicked on that and in there, but they could actually pick and choose which calendars they want to import, whether it be the class one or the one where the kids are posting their different historical figures and the in history postings. So here's both of them, which is now part of their calendar. What's nice about that, anytime I make a change to these calendars, they would instantly receive that. Plus, this is how they would be able to get in to actually make edits to the calendar that they have rights to edit. Be able to edit the ones that they don't have rights to edit, but they would still be able to do those. There, again, just kind of taking the calendar beyond just a productivity feature and allowing students to be able to do more with it. Okay, back over into my Chrome. This is my teacher version. So I'm going to jump into a lesson here. So I've got several different lessons I've created where I'm combining different elements of Google Sites to be able to bring collaboration and a single place to bring all of your information. So the lesson I called Sounds of War, and there's a little bit of information that the students would read up here, and then in this version here, you have music that was popular with people from the South, and then in the middle here you have music that was popular with people from the North, and then over to the right-hand side, this is music that was popular amongst both the South and the North, so there wasn't necessarily one preference or the other. And so I have some questions down here, and as you can see, I've got the YouTube videos here in the center that the students could then play and listen to a sample of different types of songs. And the prompt, of course, is why did the South relate closer to this type of song versus what the North preferred, et cetera, and what they both like, a song like this. Students could actually do a comparison between learned about the Civil War and the two different sides and why each of them were in opposition and what were the biggest differences and then how that relates to these different songs. So we're kind of taking that learning to a whole different level. With that, kind of make it a more personal connection and to kind of tie it back into their world, their environment. I've added here down at the bottom another Google Moderator, and this time I'm using a Google Moderator to allow my students to be able to go onto YouTube, select a song that closely relates to their impression of war based on the wars that they've been able to experience, which would be like the Iraq war in Afghanistan. Here, the students are able to actually post a response asking for the YouTube link, the title of the song, the artist name, and then a short reflection. I'm going to click on New Ideas so you can already actually posted a couple on here. And cash, theme Civil War songs, Civil War music. Students could actually come in here and submit a video directly from here. Again, just by simply getting their content and then posting it directly on here. So you're kind of embracing this collaborative environment, and this is your learning space, is what we're creating here, as opposed to this just being a site where people just go to click a link that takes you somewhere else to get information, and then your productivity pieces happen elsewhere as opposed to all in one spot. And the way and how easy it is to actually bring a lot of these elements in together. I'm not sure the level of experience, but it's very easy to bring in those, and the Google Moderator, I will showcase here in a little bit how to actually bring in a Google Moderator into Google Sites. The rest of it is pretty standard as far as putting in text and bringing in and inserting YouTube videos or videos from your Google Docs, as well as from your video portal if you are under a Google Apps edu domain. Of war example. I created is called Perspectives. It's providing you with different perspectives. So, for example, here I have a text as well as a video of perspectives from soldiers, so the letters that soldiers wrote, and perspectives from the government, so letters that were sent between government officials, perhaps like different addresses that were made addressed to the Union, etc., and then perspectives from the media. So I have all three listed here next to each other. And of course, you know, the YouTube video footage provides a lot of, you know, just visuals that becomes really useful for students when learning. I haven't played any yet, so I'm just going to click on play for this one.
The Church, 1864. The morning of the 5th, we advanced through an open field and gained the woods which the rebels held against a great number and a terrific fire of artillery. It was incredible. Okay, so go ahead and pause. You get the idea. So it's just a matter of bringing all these elements in together and then providing the collaborative piece. And in this case, I used, just to provide you a little bit of diversity so you could see all the different things that you could do, I'm a wall wisher, and pretty much any tool, any Web 2.0 tool that's out there that has code that you can embed, you're able to bring into your Google site. So this time, instead of being a Google Moderator, I was able to bring in a wall wisher via that embedded code, and I posted it here. So now my students, and I'm going to jump over to the student view and go to the perspective page, way down here. We come in here and I'll be able to post a sticky by clicking that. And it's going to take them out. Of course, it's going to go on to the separate page where then the student would be able to double click and put in their name and message. Video, as you can see here, is an example of a video embedded into this one. You could add an image if you wanted to, etc. And click on OK, and it would be added. So when I come back, it will appear here. So as all students begin to post, then all of them would pop up. Just a different way to create collaboration. I'm going to jump back over to the teacher. And quick, I'm going to go into, in case some of you aren't familiar with how to bring in content like that. Here, I've got a layout here that I'm using. You can tell because of the marching ants I call them, or the little dotted lines here. And so this section down here is completely separate. And so because it's separate, I was able to go in to my section and paste the code right in there. So that's what I really like too about layouts. I didn't have to guess and figure out where among all the HTML code do I have to paste this. I didn't worry about any of that because of my layer here and nothing else was in this box. It completely separated for me. So again, you go and you create this, whatever tool you're using, you create it. Once embedded code, you come here, you click on HTML, and you simply paste here, and you save it, and that's it. That's all there is to it. It's being able to bring in a tool that is through an embedded code. On perspectives. Really quick, I just want to check. I don't have my chat feature up, so I don't know
questions if I'm moving too fast here?
Question. We can keep the bulk of that end of the webinar, but
okay.
I guess since we just covered, I know the question was asked if, at the beginning, sort of when you were explaining the calendar, one of our attendees wanted to know what the purpose of the students having control of the calendar was.
So typically we wouldn't think we want to give our students control of the calendar because we normally would just use the calendar to put activity assignments, things like that. But in this case, I'm making my students responsible for having to go out, and they're responsible for different parts of historical events that we're covering. As we cover the Civil War, for example, it's highlighting different historical figures from the Civil War, then they're responsible for finding out information about these historical figures. Things like, when was this person born? If they died during the Civil War, when did they die? What notable events happened throughout the Civil War that this person was part of, and they should be posting those items. And so the student would have a listing of all of those different things that they're required to post on. And by giving them access to this calendar, they're coming into the calendar and they're starting to fill all of these calendar dates with all of this really great, rich content that you otherwise may not have direct access to. And so your students are being empowered to actually go out and collect this information and bring it back and share with the rest of the students that have access to the site. That's your biggest plus here, is empowering your students, and this is just one more way by using the calendar that you're empowering your students to have a voice. Like they did with the Sounds of War, where they have a voice, they're choosing music that's related to what war today and how they associate with the music of today's wars. It's empowering your students to be in charge of their own learning, part of that process. I went through Sounds of War, then I went through Perspectives. The next one I'm going to jump into is War Through Photos. This you can think of, again, a different lesson. The idea here is that we're looking at and the students are going to do a comparison between the Civil War and then the War of Iraq. And then in addition to that, you can see I've got a spreadsheet down here, and this is a way in which you can create collaboration in Google Sites. So I'm taking a spreadsheet that I created in a Google Docs, and students have editing rights in Google Docs to be able to edit this spreadsheet. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this link down here at the bottom. Students are actually going into the spreadsheet. They're addressing these questions here and posting their responses in here. And as you can see, I've already got some responses in here. And so we begin to fill out this section here. So for example, which photo from the war is striking and why? And let's say group 4 was responding to that, and they said the photo is because the whole out there. But typically where my students would collaborate in a Google Doc, but what I've done is I've that same spreadsheet in my Google Sites so that I can see everything here at a glance, and come to our activity, everything can be viewable from here, as opposed to having to jump my Google site and say, okay, hold on, let me go open up the Google Doc. I have to have a separate tab open for Google Docs. Not only that, but if I'm that student that was absent that day, I can then see this content from anywhere without having to jump around into too many different pages. Also, if you're on a mobile device, this becomes easier as far as being able to view, because this means I don't have to jump from here and then open up a separate page on a mobile device to try to get to the Google Doc. It's all located in one area. So as far as productivity and really allowing your kids to get to your content a lot easier and having access, this definitely works a lot nicer. Of course, just being able to see all the content in one section where you can see your videos and your videos down here, be able to come back up and reflect and see what others are writing about those particular images or what they thought about those things, etc. Everything is located in one section as opposed to in multiple places. And the collaboration piece that we're really embracing through this activity here. I'm going to
because in this example, I got up with more than just that one. Of course, I'll know, and I'm sure everyone's used at some point Google Forms. So that's the top one up here was just a spreadsheet. And down here at the bottom is actually a Google form that I'm using, and I'm asking my students to respond. This is more of like a homework. The students are going to go and talk to their families about their impressions or what they think. And you're doing a comparison between how before the photographs of the war during the Civil War, it was a delay between when they were taken and when people actually saw them printed in newspapers, as opposed to today. Of course, today, you know, a picture is taken and instantly it goes viral. And so that kind of access to information, their are going to reflect on, would that have affected the way the overall perspective of people about wars, and how does that compare between what they think of the Civil War for those people who lived through that versus what people think today about the Iraq wars. And then there's some questions here that would then go home and talk with their families about and ask, would we have to be in the know constantly or oblivious until it's necessary to know details? And of course, everybody would have a different opinion. And of course, once those results come in, then during class time, the teacher could certainly pull up on the back end that particular spreadsheet to be able to view the results and see percentages and then talk about that even further in class. And again, that connection to them personally and making it more real world, making it applicable to their lives, and then being able to connect history with what's happening today, which I think brings more value to students when it comes to learning content. And again, as you can see, and I keep reiterating this because I think this is the biggest part here of us leveraging the power of all the different Google applications, is bringing all of the elements together. Here we used not only the parts of Google Sites, but we used a spreadsheet, we used videos, and we imported images, and then we've got a Google form down at the bottom. So all the elements came together for this one lesson on war through. So examples that I have here, political cartoons, just a different topic that you could address, obviously with history. And so this is pretty typical as far as what you could expect from most, where you get a little bit of information up top and then you get an assignment. In this case, it would be, here you've got 3 different political cartoons. And the assignment here to the students is that they have to read Lincoln's inaugural address. This particular card right here in the center, the political cartoon that came out shortly after the address was given. There is the North perspective and then the South perspective, and so the students actually have to go read the inaugural address and then come back and point out elements of why, for example, here is Lincoln wearing what looks like a dress. Here it looks like it says peace, and it's got a skin that's balanced, versus on the South side of the perception, you see an eagle on top of the head here, and he looks a lot more roughed up, and obviously you can see he's got a foot on top of another person. So students doing the comparison based off of what they've read. And the thing about Google Sites, you can actually add attachments down at the bottom. So instead of having to, sometimes, you can have a link that points it to, or you can have an attachment here where students can download that. On mobile devices, this becomes really handy because you can download these in their PDFs, and then they can be pushed to PDF readers, or if you're on an iDevice, it can be pushed out to your books, which once it's pushed out, it doesn't require internet access. And so when you're providing this learning space anytime, anywhere, even when you sometimes don't have that internet connection, because the kids could download this while they're at school, and then they have all the content ready to go when they leave school and perhaps don't have a Wi-Fi connection anymore. So created as part of the political cartoons. I have a second one here, and this just to illustrate yet another way in which you can use the different applications from Google Apps and how well they come together in Google Sites. In this case, what I'm
the students do is create their own political cartoon of any war of their choice, and I do have some choices in the drop-down menu here for the different wars that we would be covering in that particular history class. So you see the Civil War, War I, II, War in Iraq, War in Afghanistan. So the student would actually pick which war they're actually going to cover, and asking them to go to toondoo.com to create their comic strip. Toondoo.com is Toondoo. It's where you can create comics, and you can do 1 panel, 2, 3 panels worth, and it comes already with a lot of built-in tools so they can be able to easily create their own comic strips. And once they have finished their comic strips, they simply come here, they put in their name. If they want to get credit for this, they'd have to put in their name. So I'm just going to make and put, I was doing one from World War I, and simply come in here and put in the URL, which I am making up at this point. Your kids would obviously put in the correct URL. Submit. So what is, I put the form here, and I've put this spreadsheet with the results of the form on the right-hand side, so that anytime any student comes to this, they would be able to see the results. I'm going to jump over into my student one, and political cartoons, and you're going to see the entry I just added is right here. What this is allowed to do is to create this space where the students get access to every single political cartoon so they could see what their peers created, which is really nice because a lot of times when we ask our students to go do projects in different places, we're having to figure out, okay, where are they going to share these projects? How am I going to get all these links? How are other kids going to get links to their peers' content? So all I've done, again, is I created the Google form. As you know, it automatically creates a spreadsheet. I went ahead and imported the spreadsheet separately on this side so everybody could see the results of that spreadsheet. All I did was make the spreadsheet results viewable for my students so that they could actually see that as well. So now I come in here and click on the different Toondoo political tunes that their classmates have created. The features here to create this cohesive, collaborative space for my students. More, let's see here. You can kind of gather and kind of get the idea here of what I've been building and how I've been piecing it together. I do want to take a little bit of time and go kind of work backwards a little bit in case there are of you who may not be aware of how to build some of these portions in. But let me cover a couple more things here. So with maps, as you all know, you can pull in some maps. You can do some comparisons and contrasts between, for example, here I just pulled an image of where the Gettysburg, and so you can see this image here, and obviously I could have pulled in a lot more, so we could have had a lot of different maps, and then pulled in the location in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, so that the students could actually visually see and get an idea of the area and where this was, where this happened, etc. And so you could actually do some really cool things here, and even some comments down at the bottom. And come over to Mike. I know there was a question about the calendar earlier, as far as we would want to give our students calendar access. And just in addition to giving them access to the calendar, I wanted to share with you other ways in which you can use this, and this is productivity, but within my Google site, I've allowed my students access to this page, on the calendar. They cannot revise this calendar from here, so they can't go back to my calendar, so I'm not concerned about that in this case. And the reason why I've given them access to be able to edit the calendar page is they now have the ability to post comments down at the bottom. So for example, here I could write, when is the political assignment due? And I this as the student, any other student could answer, even the teacher could answer, but now you have this ongoing dialogue or space so that students could actually ask some of these questions. Because as we all know, even have right in front of you, our kids sometimes they don't look right, or for whatever reason, you know, they just can't find it. And so it's nice to give them the opportunity to have those spaces to be able to add information or ask questions. So what I had to do here was give my students page-level permissions for the calendar. They have level permissions for home, for file cabinet, for all these others, but for the calendar page and historical figures, I did give them page-level permissions so that they could edit those spaces. Another example here is campaigning, and I'm using the same strategy as far as putting in some information about a campaign, PSU, or you could add things like that. And in this case, it's a vote for society. And this is from the Civil War. And so you could then comment once in page level rights and then create their own or use some of the more current for the current wars, etc. And so again, just kind of creating that collaborative space, empowering your students to do, be responsible for a lot of the information and piecing it together. One more feature that I want to show you that I put together, and then I'm going to come back and demo to bring in the Google Moderator, and then a couple of other things, and then of course address some questions. Another resource that I put together, and this is more for the productivity end, not just like the other examples that I showed you, but I find it really empowering for students, for them to be in charge of their class notes. And so what I did here in this section under class notes is I have students own notes. So perhaps I can provide the main categories like introduction, and then the first battle of Bull Run, grand strategy, and so just maybe the topics, but my students are actually going to keep their notes in this document. This document is actually in Google Docs, and I'm just 3 notes here. And so access to this Google Docs where they edit this section of the notes. So when they're in here, let's say they were typing these notes here, and just for the sake of being able to see this, and of course I'm going to start typing notes, so I'll just go ahead and bold it and make it big so that you can see. So these changes here, of course, your students are going to be typing up all of their different notes. When we come back to our Google site, and we're going to notice that any of those changes that are made in my Google document will then change here in my class notes in my Google site instantly. Sometimes if you're already on the site, you do have to refresh, but otherwise it's pretty instant. Whenever you navigate away from that page and come back to it, the changes will be there. And the reason why I do this, a couple of things. One, if you're absent and you don't go to the Google Doc, you have it here, providing all of the content all in one place. Because I've got my notes here for this first day. If I scroll down, it's for the second day, and if I keep scrolling, it will be for the third, fourth day. All of my notes would be located in one section, as opposed to me having to go to different documents in Google Docs. The idea here is that we're bringing everything into one space and allowing our students to be able to get all of their learning from one particular area. Down here at the bottom, notice too there's the comment section. So as we're adding different class notes, if students had questions about something that they didn't understand, they could actually ask those questions here. Students could respond and answer each other's questions, again empowering your students. And you could also see, and this is the part that becomes extremely beneficial to the teacher, because the teacher has the time to collect everybody's notes. That's reasonable in a classroom. A teacher doesn't have time to collect them, review them, give students feedback, and then give it back to them. Instead, in collaborative space where students are taking notes, the teacher can easily glance through one set of notes and be able to tell, did they grasp the information or did they completely miss the boat? Do I need to readdress certain things? And once again, in the question section, the teacher would be able to see what are they asking the most questions on before I need to readdress those particular concerns. You put in a Google Moderator here as well, where your kids could ask the questions about class notes, and that's kind of what I did in home section. here so that they would ask their questions in this Google Moderator on the first page and on the different topics that I cover. So I can continue to create more topics about the different lessons that we do, and kids could always come in there and post their comments, questions, etc. And all this, of course, in the end would turn into a guide that the student could use later on. You could actually use this entire system to be your classroom. This could actually turn into an online classroom solely and completely. I mean, you could use this whole piece here as your learning management system for an online classroom. This also serves the purpose of being a resource to you and what you already provide, and so it could be the add-on piece. So, for example, and I just took a screenshot here of a textbook, which is, by the way, but it's just to illustrate. I mean, this could be your text, you know, which obviously, as we know, is stagnant. There's not anything that's interactive, or it's not going to link you to anything else. But as you all know, you could easily add QR codes to that, which would then point you to different of the site that you have built, so that you've created a blended learning environment where a portion of it is with the context that you have in class, and then there's a portion of this that is available and accessible online. Used either way, depending on what your goal and what your focus is for this. One thing I just want to reiterate that what's really nice about this is that, and I'm going to jump over into the back end of this site, there's a feature under Manage Site, and simply check this box right here that says Mobile, and let me zoom a bit more so hopefully you can see. Adjust site to mobile phones. This is because you don't have to do any coding on the back end. You don't have to know HTML or anything like that. No scripting. You just simply check this box, and it's going to be a lot easier. So if you know that a lot of your students are going to be accessing the site via different mobile devices, this would definitely help. So make sure that you check that particular option there, as it's going to be a lot easier for them to be able to see your content. And then we'll open it up to questions. I believe there's still about 15 minutes left, so let me go ahead and jump into, I'm going to create a moderator example page that doesn't have anything, because I wanted to demo really quickly how you could bring in the Google Moderator, because I know for the most part a lot of the other pieces, like bringing in documents and spreadsheets and forms, it's pretty basic stuff, so I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that. If you're not, please ask questions and I will definitely demo those things. But I know that not a lot of people use Google Moderator or may not be using it along with Google Sites, so I'm going to go ahead and demo this. So this is it's just a regular web page that I've titled Moderator Example. There's nothing on here. I'm going to click on the Edit button. Better. My cursor is just blinking right there. This is exactly where I'm going to bring in my Google Moderator. If I wanted a different layout, I could change it and then decide where to put it, but we're just going to leave it there. I'm going to go to search, and because Google Moderator is not one of my basic options, as you see here, you see the calendar. That's how I brought in the calendar. That's how I brought in those class notes. The map, that's how I brought in the map earlier, and the spreadsheet, etc., and the videos. But you don't see one for Google Moderator, so I actually have to go to More Gadgets, and it's all of my gadgets, where I can simply type in Google Moderator. And it comes up with two. I'm just going to click on the second one there, and it's going to just show me an image of it and a brief description. I know this is what I want, so I'm going to simply click on Select. Pretty much scan all the other items that you can from your other Google applications all have this window that allows you to customize based off of the features that are coming in. So in this case, I don't want to display my title. You could change the width if you wanted to, etc. But what I want to point you to is the moderator URL. You actually had to get a little sneaky how you brought this in. Now they've made it very, very simple. I move over to a Google Moderator page that I created earlier called Political Voices. I copy the URL that's up here at the top to my moderator gadget here, and I'm going to paste the URL. the whole URL that was at the top there. And the gadget here, if you wanted to, it'll show you an example of what it's going to look like, and then just click OK. And that the moderator has been embedded there. I'm going to click on Save, and now you'll be able to see my Google Moderator. And, how to make this doable and possible so that your students can view everything. It all depends on what your administrators have set up on the back end as far as how you can share content, if you can share outside with the public world or if it's only within your domain. You'll have certain options available to you as far as sharing. But for the most part, what you want is to at least make everything has to be viewable to your students, whether it be that you're making it public to your domain or that you're adding your student names individually, or that if your administrator allows you to have it publicly open, then some of these items could be just completely open. That's, of course, a lot more transparent, where your parents could even see this from the outside world and be able to see everything that's going on in your classroom, making it more transparent. That requires visibility or functionality to be able to edit. I'll highlight that here in just a second. So let's finish up this section here. So you could see that it brought in the moderator. My students from here would be able to click on these and be able to view, be able to submit, etc., everything directly on here. And so that is how simple and easy it is to bring in a Google Moderator. Quick, I guess before I dive into sharing, I guess I just want to check if there are any questions so far on all of the other features that I've brought in so far, as far as the spreadsheets, the collaborative, things like that. Are there any questions?
I'm in the Q&A window. I don't see any yet, so we can just finish, and then we can head back to the Q&A window.
Then the last thing I wanted to share, because I've been toggling between the student view, and I was showing you how in some cases I'm able to share certain pages with my students, or access to be able to do things like post questions down here, and that's because they actually have access to edit this particular page. And so I wanted to share this with you. Some of you already know how to do this, but because it's a fairly new feature, I'll go ahead and show you in case there's some of you that aren't familiar with this process. So I'm going to more, and then I'm going to go into Manage Site. That's the back end of the site, and I'm going to go to Sharing and Permissions. Give any of your students access to individual pages, you do need to add them to your main site. What you would have to do is add them in and then allow them viewing rights to the main site. You don't have to give them edit rights in general, just the main site. You do have to turn on your page level permissions. You can see that option over here on the right-hand side, right up here at the top where it says, right now mine says turn them off because I have them on. Otherwise, you would see the turn page level permissions on. And when you turn that on, you're able to add your additional students, and you would be able to see here on the left-hand side, it would expand, able to see all of your different individual pages. Here, I can now come down to my individual pages, and let's say, for example, on that model example that I just created, if I wanted to, I need to be able to edit this. Notice that right now it is grayed out. I can't actually change anything. I need to come up here because right now it's set to where it says here, use the same permissions as members as TCA History 101. I need to change this and customize my permissions and be able to actually select what I want to be able to edit or view this page. So I use custom permissions, and then I'm going to click on Save. This person can this particular page and only this page and none of the rest of the pages. Say Save Changes, and you will see how you've got these little graphics here, calendar, historical figures, and moderator example.
These have been shared differently from the other ones, which are just viewable by my students. And my moderator example, and so take a little bit, no, it went through already, which is great. So now you can see I have the comment option. Before I wouldn't have had this comment option in this section had this page not been shared with me. Viewable, I mean more than just viewable, but for me to actually be able to edit. Permissions. A lot of the other features that I brought in, they're pretty standard, so I'm going to assume that a lot of you may already know how to do that. So I'm going to open it up for questions. I think we've got about 7 minutes left. If you have any questions on the strategy or the process or how something brought in, etc., feel free to ask me any of those questions. And go ahead. This link right up here is the link that will take you to this site in case you want to use it as an example, share it with your teachers so that they can see kind of what it would look like. You're welcome to use the demo. You will have editing rights to it, but you will have viewing rights, and I'll go back in and make sure, because there are some pieces I left viewing to only certain people on purpose for this particular course, so I'll go back in there and make sure I make everything viewable so that you're actually able to view everything. Just FYI, before we open it up to questions, when it's open to the public, and it's only your domain, but let's say certain parts of the site are open, then actually get to that page, they will see a message letting them know that that's not something they can see, so it'll be blank and there'll be like a little message on there. Okay, post this link.
You can put it in the chat window, and then I can send it out and put it in the Q&A transcript as well. So.
Okay.
We have a couple of questions. The first one is regarding collaborative notes. How do you hold students accountable for contributing?
There's different ways in which you can do it. Obviously, in Google, when you're in your, and let me jump in here, when you're in your Google Docs, and sorry some of these screens, you could always go into the revision history to see, who's been collaborating and so forth. But another thing that I find really useful is to actually break this down into where you assign groups of students that are in charge of that day's or that week's class notes. And what I find really great is to allow you to have a student that's signed up to be the note taker and another student within that group that's assigned to be the researcher who has to go out onto the internet and find more information about that topic, and another student who is responsible for going and finding experts on these different topics and be able to add more value and more information to it. And so you can actually formulate your groups and have each group assigned for each different, whether it be lesson or unit, and they're in charge of those notes, which become the class notes. Of course, your individual students can still take their own notes, but this way you're actually keeping a closer eye on who's responsible for what pieces, and you can see exactly, because they were in charge of the research part, whether or not they did, you can have a rubric, of course, that tells them exactly what you're looking for, but at least be able to see exactly who did what pieces. If you, as far as a whole group type of notes, you could do a couple of different things. One of which could be you could do an outline and then ask your students to have to cover different pieces, for example, like let's say here in the introduction where they have to comment or reflect on something. And I would do, instead of directly on here, you can also use the comment section, and students have to actually comment about that particular topic that you're talking about or addressing, and their comments would go here on the side. Stuff here really quick. So the student would comment, and you then be able to see all of your comments right up here via the comment stream
always, in this case, you're able to very easily see who's actually posting, so that gives students credit. It's a really nice way to actually do this. And you download, if you needed to keep track of all of this, when you download and go to File, Ads, and if you go to Word, it will actually pull in your comment stream as well, so you'll be able to document and proof of that these students actually send in their work or did their work, in case you didn't wanted to keep a file on your desktop for reference. But you do this, and it works really nicely because in that case, you could give students comment rights only as opposed to editing rights to the full document. And students are ready to kind of really have that free reign. Then you could give them rights maybe to the entire collaborative note section and really allow them to kind of embrace that empowerment and be responsible on their own, as opposed to if you really still have to monitor and make sure that they're doing their work and that they're putting in their part with the collaborative notes.
Someone wants to know how you got to the moderator URL in the first place.
Okay. Whenever you create a Google Moderator, I'm just going to go to My Series. Create it, you go through the Create Series and so forth. Once you've created your Google Moderator, you can simply, once you're in this view here, you can take the link from the top up here at the top. In the View Question, so just be really careful, because what you need is this part here. So I would just go to the home and select that URL that's right there. Use this one down here, the one that they normally give you to share your Google Moderator with other people. This is the option you would use if people are just coming to your Google Moderator to post a comment or to view questions. Or actually bring it into your Google Moderator via the gadget the way that I did it, you have to use this one that's up here.
In the Q&A window, so we have about a minute or two left. So if you have any, please put them in. But I think that your presentation was super comprehensive, and we definitely learned a lot.
Thank you for having me on. Like I said, that link is available for you guys. That's in the chat box, and Dana mentioned she's going to send it out. So feel free to use it however you need to.
Great, so much, Monica. Take care.
All right.
Came in. I will be emailing out the presentation. So look for an email with the recording and the Q&A transcript. Thank you. Bye.